Alright, hello guys, what's up? This is Coil, and this is going to be my Demon Hunter guide. And sorry, just ahead of time, I'm really fucking terrible when it comes to editing, so you guys are kind of just have to gonna put up with this, although all the information in this video is actually going to be useful as shit. So, to start off, we're going to talk about races. First off, for Demon Hunters, there's obviously going to be Night Elf or Blood Elf. My main Demon Hunter is Blood Elf. I initially made him Blood Elf because it was honestly just like there's no Alliance players really. There's very few like good Alliance players, especially. That might change with cross faction since cross faction just recently got enabled, and this is going to be from the perspective of the most recent patch. And so while I think that it's really possible that Night Elf is going to be the superior race for Demon Hunters to be, I also think that the Arcane Torrent that generates you Fury as well as removing a beneficial effect from AoE is just honestly pretty hard to beat in PvP. I haven't been able to test it as much as I'd like, but some things that I've like considered with Shadow Meld that makes it really good in comparison to Blood Elf is like, for example, you could Shadow Meld a Chaos Bolt, you could Shadow Meld a Decimating Bolt, you could Shadow Meld just plain CC. You know, we've seen this in the past, such as like Stormbolt, stuff like that. I think that this could also be pretty useful into like Rogue Mage in 2s, so like just as an example, if like Rogue Mage is like zerging in on you or some shit, they get a sap on your healer, boom, you go Shadow Meld, you know? Like, obviously they're going to be able to see where you go Shadow Meld, but you're still like gonna be forcing them to rush in on you and also delaying the go, so the rogue can't just like Shadow Step, Mark for Death Kidney, you know? And now, overall, I think I'm probably going to keep my Demon Hunter Blood Elf just because I feel like the extra purge is honestly really hard to beat, especially in combination with the Ravenous Consumption conduit. That like you almost get 3 purges in a row, right? So if you need to purge something like Alter Time, Power Infusion, Combust, like this is definitely your go-to. It's definitely been extremely useful for me. Even like Hand of Protection, like that is just gone if you're playing like and you get a triple purge, you know? Especially if you have like an R Shaman with you or Holy Priest, who is like both healers that can also purge and like help follow up and keep you aggressive. And just to go over, starting to go off with talents, obviously we're playing Havoc, you know, that's a DPS spec for Demon Hunters. And so for the first row, you obviously want to pick Fellblade. Demonic Appetite is essentially worthless, and Blind Fury is more so a PvE talent. I definitely wouldn't really pick that in PvP. And then for the second row, I'm going to go with Demon Blades as well. Burning Hatred is a decent option if you're in PvE, as well as Insatiable Hunger. I believe that the go-to for PvE is Burning Hatred, and Demon Blades is far and away the best option for PvP, just because you don't really have the extra global suppress Demon Bite. So just like having the extra shadow damage as well as like Fury Generator where you don't actually have to press the buttons for it is actually really nice. And then for the third row, pretty much always Unbound Chaos, I would say. Trail of Ruin is pretty decent into classes with pets such as like BM Hunter or a Warlock. And Glaive Tempest is also really good into comps such as like Turbo or just like any sort of melee cleave where you can like get multiple targets that are being affected by that, you know? And you're just gonna have like pretty disgusting AoE damage that way. Although honestly, I pretty much go Unbound Chaos exclusively just because I find it really difficult to beat the kill threat that Unbound Chaos provides you with, especially at max gear. I've had, I think my like biggest Fell Strike crit was around like 24k or something like that. Obviously that's like a really ridiculously high Fell Strike, but or Fell Rush, excuse me, but even like on average I would say I get around like 16 to 17k for the Fell Rush, and like that's just really hard to beat, especially even on like health pools where people have like 85,000 HP. That like when you put that like in your full like combo, that's you're doing upwards of like 50 to 60k per combo, you know? And now taking a look at the level 35 talent tree, Soul Rending is a really good option if you kind of just like fucking around. Also, if you're really confident in your abilities as a Demon Hunter. I would never pick this in 3s actually. but that's just because like Nether Walk is it's basically a bubble, right? So it's not as effective because dots like ahead of time can still, or like if you cast it too slow, you can obviously still die through Nether Walk. However, like in RBGs, even like skirmishes or solo shuffle, I would like consider soul rending for sure, just because I do find the leech to actually be really important. You could even go soul rending into some teams like that are like lower MMR and like twos or something like that, where it's going to be a dampener and you don't really see yourself getting into any sort of like burst window where you're going to need to nether, you know, in which case the soul rending can actually be pretty beneficial for helping your healer reduce the amount of healing that they actually have to do. And then Desperate Instincts, I've considered this one into RMP, but honestly you kind of need the Nether Walk. The Nether Walk is just really good to make sure that you can actually just like trinket and nether, and then you're not going to die, you know, at least if you press it on time. And then looking at the next row, also just to go over Nether Walk, I would probably do that like almost always in threes. Don't really see much of an application for it outside of that. I know that some people run it in RBGs, but I personally find the soul rending talent to be really useful. I almost never die in RBGs, so it's not like a huge issue for me. Now look at the next tree. Cycle of Hatred is a really good talent for PvE, but the one that we're looking at is definitely going to be First Blood. Just getting that Fury cost on the Blade Dance reduced to 15 is pretty insane, especially when it's like your highest damaging ability. It's going to help you to spam a little bit more Chaos Strikes and just make you more comfortable on Fury in general. And those are really the only two options to consider from this tree. Now looking at the next one, Unleashed Power is really good in RBGs. I would almost never run it in threes. Master of the Glaives, pretty bad. I would almost never run it. Can't think of any situation where you would want it. And Fell Eruption is pretty much always the go-to, just because a ranged 4-second stun that has minimal Fury and a 30-second cooldown, pretty nice. Especially when the only other stun that you're going to have is going to be Chaos Nova. As I mentioned with the Unleashed Power talent, that does reduce the cooldown of Chaos Nova down to 66 seconds, but I really don't think that's enough in comparison, especially when the baseline stun duration for Chaos Nova is only 2 seconds, you know? Now looking at the last tree, I think Demonic is far and away the best talent choice. Just getting into that extra little metamorphosis where you get the 25% haste and the 20% leech, and Chaos Strike and Blade Dance are both like empowered abilities. It's really difficult to beat this option. I did play Momentum a little bit when I initially played Demon Hunter, but I haven't noticed it to be very effective. Fell Barrage also would definitely never go that. And yeah, moving on from talents now, we're going to be taking a look at the PvP talent options. This is pretty much my go-to talent option for the PvP ones: Demonic Origins, Glimpse, and Mortal Dance. This triple combo is pretty just disgusting, especially when you have Forset. I really wouldn't run Demonic Origins if you don't have Forset. It's really only impactful when you do. Glimpse is really useful into the majority of situations. It's great into rogues, it's really good in RBGs, or it's even really good into just classes where you need to avoid large chunks of burst and CC. Because as the tooltip reads, not only are you immune to loss of control effects, but you're also taking 75% less damage, so it's like even better than a wall if you can time it perfectly. You can also dodge stuff like blind, you know, it's like just really, really useful, especially if like you're lower MMR. A lot of people aren't going to be looking to see if you have the glimpse buff when you're actually in the movement, and so you can actually absorb CC pretty easily in this. And Mortal Dance, you almost always want to run this unless you're playing with some other class that can apply Mortal Strike just as easily, such as like a Fury Warrior, where they're actually going to have a stronger Mortal Strike, and if you are running Mortal Dance with them, then you're actually getting rid of their stronger Mortal Strike. So in the one case where you're like running with a Fury Warrior and they have the 40%, you definitely want to swap this out. However, you almost always are going to want Mortal Dance. A few other really good options are Detainment, Chaotic Imprint, Reverse Magic, and Isolated Prey. These are pretty much the only other options to really consider. Reverse magic is really useful against a lot of team comps such as hunters, although like it doesn't work as well against survival hunters, especially higher rated survival hunters. They'll almost always run undispellable trap into a demon hunter, and in my experience they've usually trained the healer as well and just like trapping and CCing me. This is also really good into rogue mage to break people out of CC. This is also really good into a class like a resto shaman or an Druid, where you just you're playing in twos and you need to break a root, and it just helps you stay aggressive and without compromising your hero's position or making them waste a global to dispel you. Detainment is also a really good option, but I honestly haven't really used it that much ever since I started picking up Forset, just because I feel like Glimpse is so much more useful in a lot of situations. While it is really nice with Detainment that they're unable to receive any healing and it's unbreakable, and it increases the duration by 1 second, I just think that the 75% damage reduction and the immunity to CC until you fall on a 25-second cooldown is pretty disgusting. It definitely takes some time of getting used to, just like figuring out like some timings and understanding like when people are going to use CC and stuff like that. But once you do get the hang of it, I think Glimpse or this like general talent pick is just like far and away the best for how you're going to feel as a demon hunter. Just like the most flexible by far. And my editing is pretty shit, but as I mentioned earlier in the video, but I'm going to try and get like a picture up on screen, but if not, I'm just going to run over the gear really quickly. So I'm running Forset with the shoulders, the chest piece, the legs, and the hood. Initially, I didn't think that 4-piece was going to be viable really, because the helm stats are pretty trash, honestly. We're not a big fan of crit. But I was thinking, and so we normally are stuck with the crit verse hands, but thanks to the unity that was released with the Zereth Mortis patch, it's completely fine actually. We're able to put the unity wherever we want, and in this case it's actually pretty optimal to put it on the hands, so that you maintain the haste. As you can see, I'm still at 33% haste, 15% crit, 14% mastery, and 34% versatility. Technically, if I was like optimizing my gear a little bit more, or like not running Forset and optimizing my gear, I would actually be a lot higher versatility, but I honestly don't think that versatility is that impactful ever since the versatility effectiveness nerfs at the beginning of Season 3, which is also why I decided to pick up the Quick Oxen Ring. I just don't think that versatility is that impactful anymore, as long as you have like a little bit over 30%, which with max gear you're going to be at 34%, so you're completely chilling in that aspect. I'm also fully gemmed with 4 haste gems, 1 versatility gem, and the straddling jewel doublet. The jewel doublet is actually pretty essential, at the very least once you have all of your sockets on and all of your gems in, just because you actually get a pretty significant amount of speed just from this one ring and the one gem. As you can see, with the only other speed increase I have is the cloak enchant, and with the ring, the cloak enchant, and the gem, I'm at 16% passive increased movement speed, which is 185 speed, which is pretty insane. It's almost as fast as a mount, and yeah, it's gonna be really difficult, like along with your 2 dashes for people to, your 2 dashes, your vengeful retreat, and your fellblade for people to get away from you, which just makes the speed really useful. It also works in PvP. I don't believe that there are any other speed enhancements that do work in PvP though, just as a note. And then for enchants, you want the stamina movement speed 1 on the cloak, as I said. You want the primary stats on the chest, and then you want agility on the legs and the 2 tenets of versatility on the rings. And that is going to wrap it up for the enchants. Other than the weapons, I put Sinful Revelation on main hand, and I put Celestial Guidance on the offhand. Something to note with the gearing option here is that although I'm not a huge fan of crit, as I mentioned earlier, I do think that having the axe in the main hand is a lot better than having a double sword, just because I don't think that you get a very significant amount of haste from the sword. You only get 29, which I'm already chilling at 1100, so it's not going to put me up to 34% or anything significant, you know? Although the axe does have a slightly higher damage on it than compared to the sword. As you can see, it has pretty much 21 higher on the high end, which I think is really nice. It feels really good. And yeah, aside from that, I've basically just maximized haste on every single piece of gear. Like I mentioned, I have the one versatility gem just to keep myself at 34% right there. But apart from that, everything else is gemmed haste and the gemmed enchant, and the movement speed enchant, excuse me. Now moving on to covenants. In PvE, it's really good to go Venthyr, but we're not talking about PvE in this video. We're talking about PvP, right? So in PvP, you're definitely going to want to go Necrolord. It's really difficult to beat the 20% damage reduction that you get from Fleshcraft, as well as the heal. You get about like 30,000 healing or so just from this one cast. And then you're also getting the 46k shield, which is reduced a little bit in PvP, but you're still getting the 120 mastery, which is going to be giving you a little bit more movement speed, and it's also just going to be giving you more damage in general, you know, because you have a lot of abilities that are dealing chaos damage, which chaos damage is pretty disgusting because they can't dodge it, and it also goes through things like cloak. And then there's also something else to mention with Necrolord is obviously going to be the fodder to the flame, which is going to be coming from the Unity legendary that you're running with the Zereth Mortis stuff, which, like, it's really hard to beat the Necrolord demon in general, just because, one, you're getting, once you kill the demon, you instantly get HP from killing him, you get HP from picking up the demon's soul, and then you're also getting a 20% damage increase for about like 30 seconds, because you're getting the 8 seconds from the legendary that's added on, as well as the brooding pools, which at the 278 is giving you an additional 13 seconds. So it's pretty gross. You just have like an even better version of wings, pretty much, aside from the fact that it's not giving you increased healing during the actual buff. But honestly, I'll take that any day, you know? Something else to note with the demon is that you can also use the demon to break CC, such as a poly, blind, or trap, which is pretty disgusting. Like, if you have a lot of pressure and you don't necessarily need to pop the demon immediately, or maybe they're trying to kite you, you know, you definitely want to like hold on to that until you have like a stun where you can lock them down with an eye beam, pop the demon on them, and then they're just going to take massive amounts of damage. And now, taking a look at the actual Soulbind that we're running, we are with Plague Deviser Merilith, and we're going Volatile Solvent, obviously, Dancing with Fate for the first optional Potency rune, and then we're going into Ooze's Frictionless Coating, which is just really nice to get that shield on you, Fell Defender for the obvious decreased cooldown on Blur, 17 seconds with a 278 Conduit, you're down to 43 seconds for the Blur, which is an even better version of Evasion, basically, because it's giving you flat 20% damage taken as well. I would go Kevin's Keyring here just because I don't really see the point in running this one. It's the Keyring essentially just gives you like a lockpick, which I find pretty useful personally. I do like a bit of like world interactions and stuff like that where I do pick up locks boxes, and I find this to be useful. And then again, for the Potency Conduit, we're running Brooding Pools, so this one's going to be giving you a massive amount of just like passive damage increase, because you're getting 13 seconds of additional 20% damage increase from the Demon Soul. And then we're going with the Finesse Conduit over here for Ravenous Consumption. I just find it extremely difficult to beat the 27% chance for a second beneficial magic to get removed from there, just because when you're running Belf as well, as I mentioned earlier, you have the chance to get 3 abilities removed at once, you know? So it really helps to guarantee that you dispel something such as Combust or Hand of Protection. And then obviously you're just going into Ultimate Form here. This is going to be the health regen that you're getting from Fleshcraft. And then I have Growing Inferno as well, just because this one's actually going to give you a ridiculous amount of damage. If you look at it like in comparison, it's like around like 100k worth of damage like every single 3 scam. And I go Viscous Trail here, but that's more so just so that I can get the extra Endurance Conduit over here. And I am going with the Viscous Ink as well, which is going to help increase the amount of damage. It's going to help reduce, the amount of magic damage that you're taking by an additional 12%. And then finally, just the Kevin's Oozling. Everyone loves Kevin's Oozling, helps to keep you in combat. Really difficult to beat from that perspective. Alright, now moving on from the Soulbind and the Covenant section, we are going to be talking about macros and other general keybindings. So just to go over my macros specifically, I'm obviously going to have a Focus Imprison macro. And then I also like to have this on here. This is essentially just a slash start attack and slash cast glide. I find this to be a little bit more useful in some situations than trying to spam spacebar, so that you can get your wings out. This makes it so that you can go one and then just you can get the wings out immediately, So one jump, wings, It's really nice for that perspective. Also just nice to get the initial start attack on them. Like, it just helps to ensure that you're actually attacking the target, and to generate that fury. Apart from that, this is a failed demon macro. I use this entirely for RBGs now. I do find this to be really useful since I don't use like the RBG add-on. I just interchange whatever the tank's name is or the flag carrier's name is, put that right there, so that when I spectral sight, I can just spam this to find where they're at. And it works pretty well, actually. This one's just a plain focus macro, so that when I target someone, I can just press the key binding and it makes them the focus immediately. Really useful for me, especially since all of my abilities such as Disrupt and Imprison are going to be using that focus targeting spell. And now there's the kick as well, which I mentioned is just another focus macro. I don't have like an alternate one, so anytime that I want to kick someone, I just switch it really quickly, pressing my focus macro. This one is just like a Mali BM macro, which Maledict was more useful like last season, but this is basically just a use 13. There's just the gear saw at number 13, so if I were to put on BM, for example, it's going to swap it immediately for me, or if I want to put on Aegis, then it's also going to swap it immediately. But it's just really useful so that you don't have to worry about switching out like your key binding every single time, stuff like that. And yeah, this next one is also really useful. This is just a slash cast at cursor metamorphosis macro. So like, for example, there's no delay. I just press that metal button or the key binding and it automatically sends me in the metamorphosis to wherever I want to go. Or at the very least, like on the edge of the range where I can go with it, And then moving on from that one, I have a Spectral Sight macro as well, which this one is just ensuring that I don't, like if I'm spamming it, it's not going to get rid of the buff, I'm literally spamming the key binding right now, and Spectral is still on. And I have the same situation going on with my Nether macro. It's just because you can cancel Nether Walk and Spectral Sight if you're just like spamming them a little bit too fast. I like to ensure that this isn't happening by doing a slash stop attack as well as a slash cast exclamation point Nether Walk. This is going to ensure that you're not canceling it yourself and you're going to be able to do whatever you want inside of the Nether. For example, you could actually do a heavy shrouded cloth bandage, which let me show you that right now actually. So just really quickly, actually I'll show that a little bit later. We'll finish up the macros first. My bad. And this one as well is just going to be a focus Fell Eruption. As I mentioned earlier, I do all of my stuns, kicks, and imprisons on focus. So anytime that I want to swap that to someone, I'll either just press D or I'll right click one of the frames on the right. I don't have any add-ons downloaded at the moment, but I would just have like Gladius on the right over here. And that is also something to talk about, just like add-ons really quickly. Pretty much the only add-ons that I run are Omnibar, and Weak Auras, and Gladius. Those are pretty much the only three essential ones that I think you really need. There are some other beneficial ones that you can definitely run, such as like big debuffs or honestly whatever else you really want to just like make your life a little bit easier, to make yourself be able to focus more on the game. But those are really the only three that I need. I've been playing World of Warcraft since early vanilla, and I don't really feel the need to download more add-ons than that at this point. And yeah, now just to show you the quick interaction with Nether Walk and Bandage, you can actually just cast that and you get the full healing from the bandage. You get about like 4 ticks of it, I believe, during the nether walk, which is going to be about like 8,000 HP, which is a 10% heal. So like if you have nothing going on during that nether walk, you have no dots on you, absolutely you're going to be casting that bandage, you know. This is also more so applicable like if you're rooted during the nether walk, because if you can reposition during the nether walk, that's probably more beneficial in a lot of situations. Now just to go over a general opener, let me get over to a target dummy really quickly actually, while we just talk about the rest of the stuff, like the Keybindings. All of my Keybindings are personalized. I essentially took some ideas from other people, but okay, we're doomed. We're just gonna throw a turnip down, you know what, fuck it. All of my Keybindings are essentially personalized, although I did pick up some like tips and stuff like that from other people. So just like to go over it, I have the very basic 1, 2, 3, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 0, and then I have F over here. That's just where I have my fell blade. It makes it really easy for me to hit it really quickly, just for my hand positioning. And then I have Z, X, Alt 3, Alt 4, Alt 5, my middle mouse button, the letter A, the letter T, F2, F3, D, E, W, Alt D, Q, Alt Q, S, Alt W, Alt F, Alt E, and this is another mouse button, like on the very back. I also have auto run bound to one of my other mouse buttons. That just makes it easiest for me. Honestly, there's pretty minimal key bindings necessary with Demon Hunter in my opinion. I never really got into using Arena 1, 2, 3 and stuff like that, just because I really didn't feel like I needed them. I felt like my targeting was fine with using their plain raid profiles and the Gladius, as well as the focus macro I think is actually really beneficial as well. But apart from that, I would just recommend you picking any key bindings that are going to be comfortable for you to regularly press. Obviously all key bindings are going to be somewhat difficult when you're initially getting used to them, but you want to pick key bindings that are really close to like your natural hand position on the keyboard, you know, just because like the closer it is, the more easy it is for you to press the buttons, the faster you're going to be able to react in game, and the more efficient your gameplay is going to be overall. And now just to throw down this turnip real quick, you know, where'd it go? The general opener, when you're like opening up on someone, say like these are the gates up here, you know, like at the top of this ramp. Starting out over here, that's your target. You're running at him. Fell rush in, fell blade, immolation aura, high beam, blade sweep, throw glaive, annihilate, fell rush. Boom, boom, boom. Something to note with that opener though is that like unless you're against like a wall like that right there, you're not going to want to fell rush immediately with that Unbound Chaos proc unless you have another fell blade up, just because let me show you, like for example, like say there's not a wall behind them, you know, and I just fucking press it with no fell blade up. Now look at me, I have to like jump all the way back to them, you know. This gives them a chance to kite away from me, and so when I wait for myself to have another fell blade up with my Unbound Chaos proc, then that just makes it so that I have maximum uptime on them and they have really no way of getting away from me, you know. Something to note as well is that like against an actual player, you are going to want to fell eruption them before you cast I-beam. This should be pretty obvious. Something else to note with I-beam is that especially if you're full gear, you should absolutely have enough haste to be able to cast 2 blade sweeps every single I-beam. And this is really important because blade sweep is obviously going to be your most like highest damaging ability, as well as doing a lot of AoE damage, you know. Like just like casting that and then into the death sweep immediately, it's gonna be a ridiculous amount of damage. Unfortunately, I don't, as I mentioned earlier, I don't have any add-ons on this computer, so I can't show the amount of damage that it's actually dealing. But it is a lot more impactful than just casting your regular blade dance. And that's look at that, 35 seconds of Demon Soul, which is 20% damage increase, which is absolutely ridiculous. But Blizzard, it's completely fine, you know, don't nerf it, please. So again, just to go over it, the general opener is to Fel Rush once you're like somewhat in range, or like to Fel Rush into Fellblade range, I would say, you know? So like right there, I'm in range. And then after that, you want to pop up Immolation Aura, use your Fellblade, or excuse me, like once you're in range to Fel Rush Fellblade, you're gonna go Fel Rush, Immolation Aura, Fellblade, and then stun, Eye Beam. I already got a demon here, so I'm just going to pop that like that after the blade sweep, Fel Rush through, after I would have the Fellblade proc, you know. Accidentally fell there because DH brain, you know, nothing new. But basically, with the 33% haste, or even like above like 20-ish, I think it's like you can really reliably get a second death sweep off every single Eye Beam. I have 33% outside of it, and then once I finish off the Eye Beam cast, I actually go up to, let's take off meta. I figured, I lied, I can't. I go up to 53%, so it's like absolute. If you don't get off the second blade sweep, then you're basically just like asleep at the wheel, you know what I'm saying? And obviously, as I mentioned earlier with that opener, after the first or second blade dance, you will want to use that Unbound Chaos proc, and it'll do a lot of damage, but you want to use your intuition with that Unbound Chaos proc. For example, like if you're actually able to kill them in that opener, then yeah, use the Unbound Chaos proc, you know? But like if they're not going to die, then you want to save your Unbound Chaos proc for when you have an available Fellblade, so that you can maximize your uptime on the target. And yeah. I pretty much, other than that, like for general rotation stuff, I pretty much spam Throw Glaive on cooldown. I kind of like to prioritize it a little bit more than like Chaos Strike even, just because I like to make sure that I have enough Fury for either Eye Beam or Blade Dance, as these two are definitely going to be your main damage dealers. Chaos Strike is obviously really good as well, but you want to cast as many Blade Dances as possible when you're in Arena or PvP. Other than that, you pretty much always want to maintain your Immolation Aura, especially when you're on other people, just because once you're on them and your Immolation Aura is going off, you're just going to be ramping up in damage. As you can see, I'm not even hitting them. 550, 660, 745, it's just going to keep going up, you know? The more I'm like in range of them and the more it's hitting them, it's going to be one of your highest damaging abilities by far, especially into something like a melee cleave or people with dots. Obviously, that's going to be a little bit of fluff damage against like pets and stuff like that, but it's completely fine. You know, you're just maximizing your AoE pressure and you're doing unhealable damage. And now just to go over general like defensive ability prioritization, I would say. When a rogue opens up on you or like shadow steps to you, I would almost immediately go for the glimpse, because most rogues love to go for like a cheap shot. If you're against assassination rogue, a lot of them like to do a garrote first. So I'd actually hold off a little bit against them on the Vengeful Retreat. However, you will definitely want to use that pretty soon. Blur is really useful against the rogue mages as well, while it doesn't seem like it is. If you get this off before they actually do one of their goes, this is going to be essentially like a bark skin and can help you survive. As well as Blur is really useful for dodging stuns such as Kidney Shot or Bash, where they have to target you to hit the stun, as well as I think you can also dodge leg sweep with it. I've definitely dodged it multiple times in the past, where you just pop Blur and it just dodges it for you, you know? I actually like to cast Fleshcraft at the beginning of the arena, like as soon as you get in there basically, just to maximize or minimize the cooldown that you're going to have on it once you actually zone into the arena and it starts, you know? You can also save the Fleshcraft for when you're playing into a team like a Rogue Mage, where they're going to sap your healer, and then you can just Fleshcraft to stop like an additional second or two of that sap before he has to step over to kick you and start their CC chain. But once he does kick that, you do have like a split second to react and get that Vengeful Retreat off, because in a lot of cases, after he does kick it, he's going to want to do a full kidney or a cheap shot, you know? Apart from that, I honestly get away a lot with just using Blur, holding off for like a demon proc. As I mentioned earlier, your demon heals you for a lot. outside of Arena, I believe it heals for around 50,000 HP. This can, if you don't have like a Mortal Strike on you, that can definitely like still heal you for just as much inside of Arena, especially if it crits. And that can has definitely helped me get out of a lot of situations in the past, like just making sure that I don't have to use additional cooldowns such as Darkness, Fleshcraft, Vengeful Retreat, or even Netherwalk. Yeah, you pretty much only want to use Nether in a situation where you're like guaranteed to die. So for an example of this is going to be a Rogue Mage where they're popping everything on you, including like Combust, Vendetta, you know. You're going to want to trinket immediately when you see that and use your Netherwalk just to ensure that you don't die. The higher HP that you do it, the more beneficial that it's going to be for your team, but you do only want to use it when they're popping insane cooldowns like that or when you're really about to die. Darkness and Blur are both cooldowns that you want to use when you're higher on HP, since the higher HP that you are, the more effective you are at having a chance to dodge, as well as reducing damage taken from stuff, as well as having the chance to straight up just like avoid an attack, you know? You almost never want to use both Blur and Darkness together. However, there are definitely going to be some situations where the enemy's pressure is just going to be too much and you do need to pop both of them, you know? But for the most part, like if you can pre-dark a go or something like that, like on a stun, similar to pre-blurring a go, then it's going to save you your trinket or even other cooldowns from your healer so that you guys can stay in the lead in the game. And then, yeah, that pretty much finalizes it up for your defensive prioritization. You pretty much want to use Fleshcraft off of cooldown since the mastery buff from it is really good, as well as the heal that you're going to get. I pretty much like to do it either when they're on me to like bait a kick so that I can get a full I-beam cast off, or if I'm in a route and I have absolutely nothing else to do, you know, or even just if I need some healing, because the healing is actually really beneficial, as well as the 20% damage decrease that you have while you're channeling the Fleshcraft. And now finally, just to go over viable comps for the Demon Hunter in this Season 3 of Shadowlands PvP. I think that DH Fury Warrior is a really good noob stomper just because you have insane uptime, you're going to have insane damage, and this is going to be one of those comps where the DH can not run Mortal Dance. He can run something such as Detain, Reverse, like really comfortably with the Glimpse and Demonic Origins once he has 4-piece. DH Boomy is also really good and fun comp, although it did see significant nerfs to the Verse buff and Boomy survivability in general. The comp is still really effective at getting wins in 3s, especially when you're able to get the overall like strategies down with your Boomkin partner. Overall healer priority list, I would say, would be R-Shaman and H-Priest as being the best healers. I do also like a good Mistweaver, but they're going to be really dependent on their positioning and rotating cooldowns, similar to a Resto Druid. And I think that Resto Druid is probably one of the weaker healers that you can partner up with. It just doesn't have like a similar playstyle to Demon Hunter, if that makes sense. It just doesn't really synergize all that well. Although, like, if you can find a Resto Druid partner that you do well with, then that's more important than just trying to satisfy, like, what's the best, like, plane healer for me, you know? I think that DHDK is probably going to be the best ladder grinder comp with an Unholy DK. I would personally prefer R-Shaman just for this comp because I feel like it does help me to be a little bit more aggressive in my playstyle. But I think that H-Priest is definitely going to be a close second. H-Priest is probably still the strongest healer this patch, but I do really like how R-Shaman synergizes with DH and just how aggressive you can be, especially with something like Earth Alley. And then DH Hunter is also a pretty decent comp, although it does take more finesse than the other comps that I mentioned. And yeah, the healer priority list is going to be the same for pretty much all of these comps, where you're going to want either an R-Sham or an H-Priest. And then after that, it would be H-Pal, Mistweaver, and then an R-Druid, I would say. And yeah, I think that is going to conclude it for my Demon Hunter guide. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I will be sure to get back to them as soon as I see them. And I hope that you enjoyed this guide and that you were able to learn something pretty beneficial from it. Thank you. Have a good one.